It's our pleasure this morning to have Tom Lewanski here. Tom is with Dakota County. He is the
Natural Resource Manager.
Natural Resources Manager for Dakota County. Previously, he was with Friends of Mississippi River. Tom has got a long career in conservation and natural habitat work, and is truly an admirable person. It's been a pleasure to know him for so many years. In spite of his abrasive personality.
I'll try to smooth off the edges of that this morning. Thank you,
So
Dwight.
it's my pleasure to introduce Tom Lewanski.
Thank you. As they plaque before, please hold your booze to the end. So the first time I was really interested in birding, I took a field ornithology course from Dick Birch up in Northland College back in, it was late 1800s or something. It was 1981 or something. And I had to get involved in this because we would meet at 6 o'clock every morning in the spring semester. And, I'd be doing normal college things, so I'd be out till 4 and maybe get 15 minutes of sleep and then get up and jump in the back of this van and we drive around the city, rural areas looking at birds. So we were in Dick's van and we pulled into his back of his house. He's got bird feeders all over. I don't know if anybody knew Dick Birch, but he was a crazy ornithologist. And we're sitting there and there was a cat that was slinking around, and this cat jumped up and grabbed a bird off of his feeder. And Dick, I thought, was going to have a stroke, but I thought, if we have death involved, I want this. This is great. This is a great activity. So again, my name is Tom Lewanski, Natural Resource Manager. Does anybody know what the Peter Principle is? You rise to your level of incompetence. And so if you're doing something long enough, I have risen to my level of incompetence. When I got into this field, I was out there because I wanted to do things outside. And now I sit in front of a computer, and our staff at the Natural Resource Unit within Dakota County Parks, there's about 20 of us now, maybe 5 or 6 of those are seasonal. They get to do the fun stuff. They're out there looking at Blanding's turtles and out looking for birds and stuff. And I sit in my office looking at a computer, mostly weeping. Anyway, so because I work for the county and they're really a stickler for presentations, especially the county board, we have these trainings that we have to go through. And one of the important things I learned is you need to practice, right? First of all, if you go through this and you say, he sucks at this, I started my professional career at Carpenter Nature Center in 1983, I believe, and then they kicked me out of here about 1992. So again, hold your booze to the end. So when I was practicing my presentation, let's see if I can get this right. No, just hold off. I'm not totally incompetent yet. Wait. Maybe I am incompetent. Yeah, Jen, you better take over.
All right.
So when I was practicing, I invited a couple of friends over to listen to me. You can talk to yourself and talk in front of a mirror, but when you need somebody there. So I invited a couple of friends over who were, when I told them the topic, they seemed really interested. They're right there. And I had them for a second. As I was going through my presentation, after about the 4th hour, I started, and I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to look for verbal and nonverbal cues from you to know, boy, you got to move on, Tom, or they're involved. You get up and walk away. So about halfway through,
So it should, yeah, there you go.
this is the reaction I got from them, and so I picked up on their nonverbal cues. If they were a little bit too dramatic, I said, okay, I got to switch things up. Okay, so there's a couple of backstories. Well, ultimately, I have to take you along because ultimately we're going to get to the topic today, or my topic today is bison and birds. So the important point here is that most of our weather systems come from the west. They come from the northwest, southwest. That's the only thing that you need to look at. Look at what I did. See that? I could figure this out. I put a little smiley face right there. So our winds come out of the west. Okay, that's
point one. Point two is the Rocky Mountains were formed between 80 and 55 million years ago. As you probably know, I'm not a geologist, but the Earth is covered with these huge plates. And the plate tectonics and these things move. Sometimes they will move up over, one will go down, one will come up. And where those converge, you get mountain formation. That's as far as I'm going to take it. We could go on for hours about that thing. So that's the Rocky Mountains occurred back a long time ago. That's point number two. So as I just told you a couple of minutes ago, our winds and systems come out of the west. They come off of the Pacific Ocean. There's a lot of moisture in these systems. It's warm, and they hit the Rocky Mountains or the mountains out there, and they're forced to go up and over these mountains, right? As air rises, it cools. It becomes less dense and it cools. For every 1,000 feet you go up, you lose about 5 degrees in temperature. So if you have to go up 10,000 feet, you've lost, I think I can figure this out, I'm not a mathematician, 50 degrees, right? Cooler air holds less moisture than warm air. So as these systems go up the mountains, they're dumping the moisture. They can't hold that moisture off the Pacific Ocean. So most of the precipitation is wrung out of these systems on the western side of the mountains. As the system continued to go east, then they go over the mountains and they go down, they become more dense. But as I said, most of the moisture has been wrung out of these systems. So where do you find the deserts? Is on the eastern side of these mountains, because the air systems that come don't have much moisture in them. Annual precipitation map of United States. So again, if you look at where Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, there's very little moisture that falls there. And again, that's where you see your deserts. And as you continue to go further east, you get systems out of the Gulf of Mexico that have a lot of moisture in them. So they combine, and the further east you go, the more precipitation you have. So when you get out in the western side of the Dakotas and Colorado, Wyoming, there's just isn't very much moisture, cannot support trees and shrubs and things like that. The plants are very small, except along rivers and things like that. Again, as you go further east, you pick up more moisture, and you begin to get to a point where you can support trees and tall grasses and things like that. So if you look at where Minnesota is, up in the northwest part of the state, there's not much moisture down there, and it grades down to the southeast part of the state where they do get quite a bit of moisture. As we look at an original, by the way, I could go on for days, so please tell me, Tom, we got to wrap things up. We got to get these people out of here. So original extent of prairie in Minnesota is the yellow, along the western boundary of Minnesota, down along the south. And if you see that there is a finger of prairie that comes up into Dakota County and a little bit into Washington County. The red dots are the remaining prairie that was there approximately 1995, 1994, when the Department of Natural Resources came through and did the county biological survey. There's probably 1% of original prairie remaining today. There's not much there. So what the hell is a prairie? Pardon my language. Well, you can read that. Prairie is the ecosystem dominated with grasses and non-woody plants with less than 10% tree cover. What's interesting, if you look way over on the left, that's Kentucky bluegrass, what we love to grow on our lawns. The root systems are just go down a couple of inches into the soil, right? So if we have a drought, what does your grass do unless you're watering it? It turns brown. It can't go down in the soil and grab the moisture, compared to some of the native prairie plants where their roots go down 14, 15, 16 feet down into the soil, trying to search for and grabbing what moisture there is down there. So over the millennia, these roots die and things, they die, and it develops these deep, dark, rich soils. If you think about where the breadbasket of the country is, it's the tall grass prairie that have these wonderful soils, which we are harvesting today. That's where we grow our corn and soybeans and things like that. Native prairie contains thousands of species of plants, and the bison story really starts with the prairie ecosystem. Over 900 species of plants have been recorded in the remaining prairies in Minnesota, with up to 300 of them in the individual prairie remnants. And of course, there are a myriad of animals that utilize the prairie for their habitat. Now, we start at the macro and we're working down to the micro here. So again, this is historic land cover in Dakota County. The yellow is the tall grass prairie. The orange, if that's what color that is oak savanna. Oak savanna is the transition zone between the prairie and the forest to the northeast. So these fires would come up roaring out of the west, out of the southwest. And I've read accounts of back in the 1800s. At night, you can see off in the distance, could be miles and miles away, this red glow, right? And you knew that there was a prairie fire. You could not outrun these. If you had a big headwind, these things traveled really fast. Even on a horse, you couldn't outrun them. So there are accounts where people are on a horse, they kill their horse, they gut it, they climb inside the cavity, and the fire goes over them. These fires are extremely hot, but they're just like that, they're gone. It's not like a forest that burns where you have all of that plant material that could burn for hours and days. Once those grasses burn, they're done. It's very hot, but it's very quick. So these fires came up through the southwest, hit the forest, right? And most of the trees got killed, except for which ones? Oaks. The oaks, yeah, the bur oaks and the white oaks that have thick enough bark that they could survive it. If you want to see a great remnant of what this area used to be like, go down to the Old Mill Park in Hastings. It is a wonderful oak savanna. It gives you a sense of what this area was like back in the mid 1800s and before. Okay, just another example of the prairie in Dakota County and around where Carpenter Nature Center is here. Again, the red dots are the remaining prairies that were in the 1990s. And I know some of you, I think, are going to be going there. One of the largest ones is the Sand Coulee, just south of Hastings, a wonderful prairie to get a chance to go frolic through there. One of my claim to fame in the birding world is at the Sand Coulee SNA, I discovered a Buick's wren that hadn't been seen in the state for many, many years. I didn't know what it was at the time, but as I'm out there, that is a bird that I've never heard before. And so I had to search it out, and that's what it ended up being. So I can die happy now. So cascading. As you've heard a billion times, things in nature are related to everything else, right? So cascading is if you impact one part of this system, the impacts go throughout the whole system, right? So an example of a kind of a negative cascading, if you will, cascading impact is with the loss of the prairie, we start losing individual species, right? So the prairie violet is a low-growing native forb or flower. The butterfly there is a regal fritillary. Its larvae can only eat prairie and birdsfoot violets. If you lose the prairie, you're losing the violets, you're losing the regal fritillary. Regal fritillaries are now considered by the Department of Natural Resources as a species of special concern, meaning that their numbers are very, very low. Dakota County Parks, we are in the process of growing. We have a new greenhouse. We're growing a number of these prairie violets. We're putting them out in the bison range with the hope of getting it up to maybe 10,000 plants out there. And we're going to try to reintroduce the regal fritillary out there. Used to be one of the most common butterflies in the state, but they're rare now because their habitat is gone. Cascading. And then, of course, that there are birds and wasps and spiders that eat that butterfly, their numbers could go down as well. How am I doing? Okay. So the North American Bird Conservation Initiative published the 2025 State of the Bird Report. Key findings of that report are 1/3 of U.S. birds are of high or moderate conservation concern, including 112 tipping point species that have lost more than 50% of their populations in the last 50 years. Get that, 50% of their populations in the last 50 years. I put a couple of arrows at some of the grassland bird species, not that necessarily found around here. Baird sparrow is up in the northwestern part of the state. Sprague's pipit. We do have bobolink around here. In the yellow alert tipping, you can read what those mean. I'm not going to read it to you. Field sparrow, Harris's sparrow, Henslow sparrow. These bird species are in trouble, as many are. But we're kind of specifically talking about grassland birds today. Of course, with the loss of prairie, it's not surprising that the plants and animals that call prairie ecosystem home are in decline. As you can see from this diagram, there has been a 43% decline in grassland birds since 1970. Without prairie, these birds don't have any place to live. They don't have the habitat that they require. Just a table that shows this. Watch this. Huh? I'm a whiz at this. A table of how different bird communities are doing. The bird community that's doing the worst are the grassland bird species. There are other communities that aren't doing very well, but it is the grassland bird species that are doing the poorest. So, grasping the problem. I know you can read, but I just love the sound of my voice, so I'm going to read this. Grassland bird declines are driven by historic and continuing threats across the full annual cycle, including grassland habitat loss, agriculture intensification, woody encroachment, and disruption of fire and grazing regimes. More recently, energy development activities, the use of neonicotinoid, got through that one, pesticides, and anthropogenic climate change have emerged as additional threats. That's the problem. So what is Dakota County doing to help that problem? As I was saying before, because Minnesota gets enough rain to support trees and shrubs, there were three main drivers to keep the prairie in Minnesota: climate, fire, and grazing. Dakota County is in the process of restoring hundreds of acres of prairie and oat savanna in our parks. And I would invite you to go out and frolic in those prairies if you get a chance to do so. So just a few quick photos. The one in the upper left is prior to the starting of restoration. My guess is, I don't know this, I wasn't involved specifically in this, but my guess that field didn't have any or very few natives in it. It was all exotic invasives that were there. So if you are a seed, a prairie seed, and in order to germinate, you need to find mineral soil. And so what we do is we nuke the site. Sometimes we'll use herbicides. We'll burn the site. We may have to burn it a couple of times. We'll disc it to get down to that mineral soil, and then we'll plant the seeds. A couple of years later, the lower photo there, most of those are native species, native grassland species. So it comes along pretty well. It takes years. So if you've ever seen somebody do prairie restoration, the first couple of years, it looks terrible. It's a weedy mess. Those prairie plants are putting their root systems down first. And so after a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, depending on what the climate conditions are, that's when they start sending their part of their body up and flowering. We use fire as a management tool. We have eliminated fire from the landscape, mostly for good reasons, so we're not burning our houses and things like that, but it is a natural process that is very important for prairie. Fire does incredible things for the prairie. It returns the nutrients caught up in that dead plant material back to the soil to be used again. By burning, it opens up the soil to the sun's energy earlier in the spring. Many of the prairie plants are sun loving. They love the heat. They really get going and thrive in June and July. That's really when they're at their best. So if they could start earlier in the spring, they can compete better with the non-native species that are there as well. Fire tends to kill encroaching woody plants, which, there's nothing wrong with the forest, don't get me wrong, but if we want to keep our prairie heritage, we have to keep the shrubs and trees off, because if you got a tree growing here, it starts shading out the native plants there and they extend. So without fire or grazing, it will transition to a forest, or at least a savanna. How am I doing? There we go. So the one major driver that we have been missing, and it's missing from most of our prairies, is grazing. And the native grazer, no surprise to you, was the bison. That was the primary grazer of North American prairies. Bison are considered a keystone species for the prairie ecosystem. A keystone species is one that is so important for the habitat that it lives in that if you remove it, that system doesn't function the same way. Another keystone species, which may be more familiar to you, would be the beaver and wetlands. Without the beaver, the wetland just doesn't function the same way anymore. The bison is a keystone species for the prairie. And they impact the prairie in incredible ways. There's a lot of research. If you want to go down the rabbit hole, there has been a lot of research on bison, their impact on the prairie ecosystem and birds, which apparently that's our topic for today. Through their numerous behavioral and physical traits, they improve the prairie ecosystem. Their primary food, about 90 to 95% of what they eat are the grasses. And what that does so if you saw that picture of the prairie violet that grow maybe 4, 5, 6 inches, you're competing with Indian grass or big blue stem that can grow 5, 6, 7 feet tall. So the bison come in, eat the grasses. That really allows the forbs or flowers to compete and to do quite well. With more flowers, again, cascading, but this in a more positive direction. We have cascading. When you have more flowers out there, you have more insects. And when you have more insects, you have more birds and mammals and amphibians and things like that. The system is more diverse and therefore stable. They love to wallow. And just their wallows are just really incredible things. They tend to come back to the same spot. Now, an adult female is about 1,000 pounds. An adult male could be 2,000 pounds. They come back to the same spot and wallow. You can see the little divot there. I'm not quite 2,000 pounds. I'm kind of heading in that direction. But by coming to the same spot, they condense the soil down, right? Providing these little divots. Those divots hold water longer than the surrounding area. So during snow melt or during rain events, water tends to pool in these little divots, providing drinking water for other animals that are on the prairie, providing breeding habitat for frogs and toads. There's a study done at the Conza Prairie Biological Station, which is a mesec grassland down in the central Great Plains of North America. I believe it's in Kansas, doing research on fire suppression and experimental absence of bison, and found out that there was much less tree cover with bison grazing than without them. And I'm not going to go through all of these, just little snippets from things that I plucked out of recent research. I think the point is that bison improve the prairie ecosystem in many, many ways. And again, you think about the grassland birds and their numbers are decreasing. You want an animal like bison out there that are improving the habitat. Bison present increases plant diversity, helping that community to be more resilient and stable over time. And they impact it in many other ways as well. Seeds cling to the animal's fur, assisting in the dispersal throughout the prairie. I had an idea. So when we'll get to the bison, how much time do I have?
You have about 20 minutes.
Oh, geez, Louise. Okay, so we bring the bison every year. They come into the handling facility and we have a vet from the zoo comes over, then gives them immunizations, checks for internal parasites, looks at them. If they have any psychological issues they want to talk about, there's a little place they can go do that. So I had this idea of seeding their fur, because we take them from the whole troop down to a single animal in the squeeze chute. I thought about taking some species of plants that are not out there and seeding their coats and seeing where, if those seeds find a place to germinate and grow. Haven't done it yet, but I may do it this fall. Their scat provide habitat for insects, disperse seeds, and cycle nutrients. Get this, grassland bird species use bison fur to line their nests. So their babies are just comfortable on this nice bed of bison fur. And rubbing their horns helps to minimize woody plant encroachment. Come on, little guy. There we go. So one example. This is Flodman's thistle. There are native thistles that are wonderful. This is one of them. It's pretty uncommon, but it can be found around this area. It provides nectar for many pollinators like bees and butterflies, and birds eat their seeds. So a quick table, the lines I want you to concentrate on are the black one and the blue and possibly the green one. So the y-axis, the one that goes up and down, is percent of frequency of occurrence, and the x-axis are years. And so you could see ungrazed areas, black, Flodman's doesn't do very well, but with light or moderate grazing, the population or occurrence of thistle goes up considerably. Just one example of what grazing does for them. Okay. This is a map of the original range of bison in North America. The red would be the one you'd want to concentrate on. They were found almost over to the Atlantic coast. They went all the way down into northern Mexico, all the way up to northern Canada, and over to the western United States, a fairly large area. And you can't really read this, but the little red doohickeys here are the years that the bison were last seen in that area. So if we went straight across into Wisconsin, that date says 1832 was the last time bison were seen in that part of Wisconsin. I could find no reference to the last bison to be seen in Dakota County. They were there. If there were approximately 300,000 acres of prairie in Dakota County, bison were here. I couldn't find any evidence. My guess is, if you were going to ask me, the last time bison was in Dakota County, I would think it'd be somewhere in the range of 1835 to 1840. The last wild bison in Minnesota was seen way up in the northwestern part of the state in 1882. Prior to European settlement on the continent, there was an estimated 40 to 60 million bison that occupied North America. By the beginning of the 20th century, there were only a few hundred remaining. Went from 50 million down to maybe a couple of thousand. Why? Well, beginning in this is from the National Park Service. This isn't Tom making stuff up, although I do make up stuff all the time and lie. I'm not doing that right now. Beginning in the 1860s, Conflict raged on the prairies as the U.S. Army attempted to subdue the Plains Indians in order to make way for white settlers and railroad lines. Federal officials recognized the importance of bison on the plains where native nations had yet to be forced onto reservations. In 1873, the Secretary of the Interior noted that the civilization of the Indian is impossible while buffalo remain on the plains. Following this logic, the Army provided free ammunition to people to go out there and slaughter the bison. The last remaining wild herd was in Yellowstone. That herd is still there. During this time, there were ranchers in North America that brought some bison onto their ranch and bred them with cattle, thinking that they could get the benefits of the bison and the cattle. That experiment didn't work very well, but what it did do is it protected some of the bison, and those bison, I think, were the seed, if you will, for a reestablishment of bison in North America. A couple of disgusting photos there. You can see the one on the left, that's a pile of bison skulls. They would grind them up into fertilizer. And the gentleman on the right is sitting on, as it says there, 40,000 buffalo hides. I've seen photos where there are thousands of bison out on the prairie that are just laying there to rot as the federal government came through and slaughtered them so that they could control the Indian nations. If you haven't seen the documentary about North American bison by, what's dude's name? Ken Burns, you have to look that up. It really is fabulous. Okay. So to bring back grazing to at least one of our prairies, we brought some in 2022. The backstory there is, as I started this job, I was doing a presentation, I believe, in the School of Environmental Studies over at the Minnesota Zoo. And one of the commissioners were there. And the next morning he called me and said, Tom, I was talking with the executive director of the Minnesota Zoo, and he wished that there was a place that we could have bison out on the prairie. You know, they do have some in the zoo, but they have an opportunity for people to see bison on a prairie. He said, would we ever consider doing that? On the inside, I was jumping up and down and going crazy because for as long as I've been doing this work, I would have loved to have the native grazer on the prairie. Right. But on the outside, I was trying to be real cool. I said, boy, I don't know, Commissioner, I'm not sure if that'd work or not. And so that started us on this 4-year journey. We received a grant from the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund in the state for $560,000 to build the infrastructure. It also allowed us to get in and do pre-treatment surveys. So we got out and surveyed the bumblebees and the birds and the plants and the snakes and things like that. So we had a pretty good idea of what was on these prairies at Spring Lake Park Reserve before we treated it with the bison. And we're continuing those surveys so that we can judge over time what are the impact that these bison are having on the prairies there. Jen, how am I doing?
Good.
All right. Ooh, good. All right. Spring Lake Park Reserve along the Mississippi in Ninja Township and Rosemont was chosen for a couple of reasons. There's about 160 acres of prairie, which we analyzed the plant material out there. We think that it can support about 15 adult bison. And as we were evaluating each of our parks, we had a couple people from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources go out with us and help us evaluate which park would work best. They said that if you're going to bring bison in, people are going to want to see them. So you need to have infrastructure for people. Had I been the king, apparently we don't have a king in this country. I'm hoping I could be it. But anyway, if you've ever been to Meesville Ravine Park Reserve down in the southern part of the county, there's about 300 acres of prairie up on the top there. That would have been the ideal condition, but there were no infrastructure for people to come and see them. So Spring Lake Park was chosen because there's parking, there's restrooms, someone put a trail through there. My original idea was to have 160 acres open for the bison just to roam as they would. Apparently risk management didn't think it was a good idea for people to be driving their bikes through the bison range. You've probably all seen videos out in Yellowstone when knuckleheads want to take a selfie with the bison, and next thing they know, they're flying through the air. So we broke up that, it's 150 acres that we are utilizing. We broke it up into paddocks. So the most important thing to us is the health and safety of the bison. So that illustration on the right is the fence design. These animals, as I said, are 1,000 pounds, 1,500 pounds. From standing, they can jump 6 feet into the air. They can run 35 to 40 miles an hour. And so the fences had to be 7 feet high. Some of the considerations that we thought about was, okay, we put up these fences that's 7 feet tall. We don't want them to be barriers to the other animals that are living out there, right? The skunk and the badger and coyotes and things like that. So where we could, we raised the fence off the ground a foot, and in other places where there's more you humans, we had to bring it down to like 6 inches. In the winter, we can see that animals are coming and going all the time. It is not a barrier at all. And deer can go up and over these fences without a problem. So each of the paddocks has because of where this is located, Glacial Warren River came down here, and we have these terraces, right? And it's just sandy. It doesn't hold water very well. So we had to put cattle waterers in each of the paddocks. Wherever the bison are, they have access to water. Come on, little darling. There we go. So this is more of an accurate depiction. Watch this. God, that's great. We just moved them from paddocks 2 and 3, like 1. So this is a good time for you to get out there and take a look at them. There's something zen-like sitting and watching bison graze. Sometimes in the morning on Sunday, I'll grab some coffee. I'll just go out and watch there. They're fascinating. They'll be there for a couple of weeks. That paddock is undergoing restoration. There's not a lot of forage there, but they're in there munching on those fresh green grasses that are growing. In a couple of weeks, they will be moved further east. Okay, we have a number of partnerships with University of Minnesota Duluth that's following Fisher. There's Fisher in our park. We partner with a professor down at Carleton College that is looking at carbon sequestration in the wallows, the bison wallows. And Carpenter Nature Center has been a wonderful partner of ours, getting out and doing breeding bird surveys, but also this monitoring avian productivity and survivorship study for the last 4 years. The last year is this year. Doing some analysis. They did analysis. I've done none of this. So they looked at bird diversity changes between years in paddocks and analysis of bird abundance. They could find no significant statistical differences. Now, as you look at this table, you can see that there has been a gentle uptick in the number of species. In 2022, 29 bird species were banded, and last year there were 33. So we are seeing the trend going in the right direction. Direction, I think is how most people say that. General increase in number of species. Again, general uptick from 67 to 72. It's too early really to draw any conclusions from this. The bison came in 22, we're in 26. I anticipate we will get some meaningful data in maybe 15, 20, 25 years. That's how long it takes really to see changes that we can attribute to the bison. No statistical analysis or significance except in paddock 1 where they're right now. So the little box on there, so the blue are the hatching year birds, and the red, if that's what that color is after hatching year. Why they call it after hatching year, not adult, I have no idea. Talk with Jen. But you can see that in paddock 1, in 22, 23, and 24, there were some small differences, except in 25. Look at the jump in the number of hatching year compared to the adults. We don't know why. I don't know if you've come to any conclusions about that. That paddock, as I said before, is undergoing a lot of restoration work. Maybe it has something to do with that. I don't know. The bison were also in there last year. We've removed a lot of trees. We've planted a bunch of things. It's statistically significant. I can't answer it. I don't think anybody can at this point. So what are kind of driving the changes in paddock one? You can see a list of the bird species that were, I believe these were banded there. Great to see field sparrow. They are a species of greatest conservation need, meaning that their numbers are going way down. Clay-colored sparrow, chipping sparrow, song sparrow, vesper sparrow, some great ones. I know some of you are going out to Spring Lake Park. Maybe you can see some of these out there. I think Kevin's taking people out there. How lucky are you to go out birding with Kevin? Okay. One of the things that I have learned, we have a tribal liaison, is I've learned the significance of the bison to the Plains Indians. Again, because I love to hear myself talk, I'm just going to read this to you. So sit back, close your eyes, and just listen to my lilting voice. Since time immemorial, hundreds of generations of the first peoples of the First Nations of North America have come and gone since before and after the melting of the glaciers that covered North America. For those generations, buffalo has been our relative. Buffalo is part of us, and we are part of buffalo culturally, materially, and spiritually. Our ongoing relationship is so close and so embodied in us that buffalo is the essence of our holistic eco-cultural lifeways. The government knew this back in the 1800s and knew that we had to control the Plains Indians, the Dakota, the Lakota, and others. We needed to control the bison. It was very effective. So it's been wonderful getting to know some, we've worked with Prairie Island Indian community and with the Shakopee Metawakan Sioux community. Shakopee just started their own bison to get to know the cultural significance of this animal. It's made the project richer. I'm getting near the end here. The Bison Reintroduction Project has won a number of local, state, and national awards. If anybody's interested in research, I have citations. I don't know why you'd want to, but if you're a wonk like me and you're interested in literature, I can provide this to you. Each week, staff go out into the paddocks in vehicles. They don't walk out there. I'd give them a knuckle sandwich if they did. Safety for the animal and for our staff. Each week we go into the paddocks and we put our eyes on them. There's a ranking system. You look at the animals, you can judge their health by a couple of things. We look at the fence to make sure that they're there, make sure that the waterers are working and they're clean. On April 1st, I wasn't a part of the group that went in, but I was on the outside looking in, and I want to just do a short video of spring fever in a bison. If anybody has a dog, you know what a zoomie is. Look at how they prance. So somebody's over in the far left in the water area, cleaning it out and everything, and suddenly the bison started running at them. And I was like, gee, Scott, get in your vehicle. They turn around and ran the other way. There's a vehicle over here to try to draw them away so they're not over there bugging Scott. But they were chasing each other. They're doing zoomies. I think they had spring fever. Anyway, I found it fascinating. So with that, that's the end. If you have any questions, I don't know how much time we have. I think I nailed it pretty close.
That was very impressive.
Nice. Okay, any questions you have, I'll be hanging around for a few minutes. This is now the time to boo or throw tomatoes if you brought them. Anyway, thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
If you'll entertain it, we probably have time for about 3 questions. So does anybody have a question for Tom? This is super cool work.
Hi.
Right, so in a book I've read called Braiding Sweetgrass, they talked a little bit about the saliva that buffalo had and how it affects prairie plants. Do you know anything about
I
that?
know nothing about that, but that's fascinating. I have that book. I didn't get to that part yet.
Yeah, it's a.
Oh, what's the question?
Well, say it louder if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so in a book that I read called Braided Sweetgrass, there's a section of it that talks about how essential buffalo are. And their saliva helps prairie plants grow. I was looking for more insight on that.
Unfortunately, I don't have any insights. Hi,
So technically, the correct name for the species in America are bison. Buffalo, I guess, are typically Africa or Europe, so I don't know where the name buffalo came from in America, but. I just looked up, said, what's the difference? They said, actually, our species in America is bison. Is what's your?
the scientific name is bison. Yeah, so that's the genus, species, and subspecies name. There is a bison athabascan, which is the woodland bison up in Canada. I'm ambivalent about it. When I talk with indigenous people, they call them buffalo. They want to call them buffalo, it's fine. They are different than the water buffalo, which is over